Well, today we spoke about a lot of past machines. Today I'm going to go a little bit forward, and today I'm going to be discussing the Plus42 advanced editor functions. The Free42 app, the Plus42 app is an app that is an update of the Free42, which is based on the HP42. And it has a display of 8 rows and 22 columns. The text can be resized, and it operates either on 4 stacks, the classical 4 stacks, or it can run like a 48 family. It can in big stack mode. It is available on Windows, Mac, iOS, Linux, and Android. The Windows version is free. Other platforms may incur a small cost.
No, Mac is also free. Only iOS and Android cost. The others are all free.
Plus42.
And this is a relatively new app. It was released this year, April 27th. And I think I don't know, the last time I checked, the price was $9.99. It could be less now.
Okay, let's see here.
Here we go.
Is the clicker connected?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it works.
He's fine.
Okay.
As I prepared the last edit of this presentation,
Just $9.99.
$9.99. The last of this presentation, which I was prepared August 16th, it's accurate as of the release of 1.0.10. There could be an update between then and now. And you can check out all the updates on Thomas Okun's website. It'll be there. Okay, the new features. You can graph functions, including zoom, and you can integrate functions when they're graphed. You can attach units to numbers and store them in variables. It's an extensive time value money module with amortization schedules. You can actually generate amortization schedules with Plus42. What it is essentially is that it's marrying the Swiss Micros DM42 and then the 27S together. My focus today is going to be mainly on the equation editor. The equation editor does contain all the functions of the 17B, 19B, and the 27S, which includes finance, the if and else, then else structure, sum, S for solve for, L for let, G for get, G for recall, not forgetting. What Plus42 adds to it is the complex numbers lists carried over from the Free42. Matrices. The financial functions are beyond just the present value and future value factors, and Boolean operations. However, all the numbers stored in the Plus42 are stored as decimals. In decimal base. When you go into the equation mode, several keys do change, which is really nice. So for these 2 keys here, the exchange, last x, modes, and change sign become parentheses and brackets. And then down here, you got show and program. They change into comma and colon. And then the RS becomes the equals key, which really allows easier editing of equations. Also, some of the menus do change when you're in equation mode. And just to access the equations, you just press the EQN button, and it will show all the equations that are stored in the app. It will allow you to rearrange the order of the app, the order of the equations, edit, delete, all that good stuff. One of the changes is in the program function editor. So if you are in the editor of the equations, you get access to any of the programmable functions particular to the equation editor. So some of the new guys up here is wrong one. For break, continue, sequence, execute. You can test if the number is real, complex. You can test for matrices, strings, list, equations. If the variable has a unit, all the tests come from the free 42. You also have integration and then time and date. Okay. We'll start with complex numbers. The way complex numbers in the equation editor works a couple ways. You can edit and enter complex numbers directly when you are solving for variables using the classic second complex keystrokes. However, if you have any constants that you want to enter in the equation, then you're going to need to use
You passed one screen.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh yeah, there's a gun. Oh, I went ahead. Sorry about that, guys. You do have the option of extracting the real, imaginary, absolute value and argument of a complex number. So for this example here, z naught equal to z1 squared plus z3 minus z3, and you just enter complex numbers directly into the variables, and you can solve for equations and it will solve in the complex number plane. Even if you had all real numbers as inputs, you can still get complex number results. If you want to enter constants, like if you had your equation like z naught equals z plus 3 plus 5i, you have to use one of the two commands, either r complex or p complex. R complex in the editor is called by the shift to store key sequence. All complex numbers in the plus 42 are stored in the rectangular form. So in this equation up here, R complex forms the complex number 3 plus 2i, or for engineers, 3 plus 2j. Next you have integration, which there are several ways, but one of the fastest ways to do it is press the shift key and the 8 key, and it will bring up the integral sign. It takes 4 arguments: expression, variable, lower limit, and upper limit. The 5th one, accuracy, is an optional argument. If you leave that out, then the plus 42 will default to maximum accuracy. You are not limited to entering just limits. You can actually solve for limits. The equation editor can also take anything directly from the stack. You can use the four level stack by pressing the roll down key, and then you'll get a chance to get from the X, Y, Z, and T stack levels, or if you have big stack turned on, you can use the stack function with whatever stack level you want in square brackets. This is a read-only access. You can't store anything to the stack from the equation editor. So in our next example, this equation, F equals sine of register x stack squared plus y stack squared, all that divided by cosine of y stack squared and x squared. It takes values from the x and y stack. Now, you can have the values on the stack before you enter equation editor mode, or you can send the equation to calculate and enter amounts there. It'll give you full access to the stack. One of my favorite things of the Plus42 is the user functions. You can have user functions of any number of arguments you want. And the syntax of the user function is you have the name, in parentheses, you list all your arguments separated by colon. When you solve for a user function, the CALC soft key turns into an evaluation soft key, EVAL. User functions can be used in other equations. So in this example here, I have the user equation OLN of x equals to a logarithm of the absolute value of 1 minus x divided by 1 plus x. And then in the next slide, we get to use OLN in another equation. A good idea if you are going to use a user equation is to go ahead and use the let and get function, so you only have to enter the username just once. And that can come real handy if you need to break a large equation down into more than two parts or more. The equation editor can also call programs in equations, and it's usually going to be in the format. The program's going to be in the format as if you were going to use the solver. So you're going to have all the MVAR with all the variables first, and then enter your program where you're solving your equation, and then it will return. The syntax for execute is the name, and then followed by a colon, and then each of the variables designated by MVAR in order. So this provides a pretty good way for the Plus42 to integrate both programs and equations. So in this example here, I have Wx of taking two arguments a and b, and then I have an equation Px, and P of x uses the results of Wx, and then another one c, but I'm going to set that up as an equation. So the program Wx it's a pretty small program. I have my MVAR set as A and B, and then I set up my program. And then Px, just call Wx from using the execute function. And when I solve for Px, all the variables from both the Px, all the original variables that are going to be used, and the program are going to be included in the software when you are solving for that from that equation.
Can you put the A and B on the stack and do it like the regular two operation, like the plus operation?
Yes.
The RPM style. That's good.
And here's solving for Px in action. And you can see all the variables that are available to you. So you don't have to run the program first. The execute function will run the program for you. Probably the most complex one, command of all the Plus42 in the equation mode is the for loop. The for loop is very specific. It takes the initial commands and then it goes with a conditional to test. And if that condition is true, it goes to the loop commands. And then this third one here is like the next expression. That's where you're going to increment or decrement the counter variable. It's a little bit unusual because, as opposed to the traditional for loop where you have for variable is equal to some lower limit to upper limit, your loop commands, and then next or step. So your initial commands, you're going to set up the variables. Your condition is your test condition. If the true, the loop continues. If not, the for loop is done. Your next expression is going to be changing your counter by increment or decrement or whatever you want. And then the loop commands is the main loop commands. Now the loop commands, you can have more than one here. So you have more than one loop command. It's like loop command 1, colon, loop command 2, colon, loop command 3, colon. However, it seems like we're only limited to one initialization command. That is, and I'll show you how to have more than one initial command in just a moment. To me, it looks like more of a while loop than a for loop. So you have initial commands from here, while initial commands, and then the second one is the condition. It's like while this condition is met, and then jump over to the last section, the loop commands, and the next expression.
Weird.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think-
like a while.
I think Thomas would have been better off making this a while command than a for. And then on the right here, here's what a for command in the solver looks like if you were using labels and go-tos. Initial commands, and then you have a label, and then the loop commands, next expression. If condition is true, then start back over again. We also get auxiliary commands built for the loop command in the Plus42. Sequence is going to be the one that we'll be using a lot, and it just allows for sequence commands. This is how we can expand the initialization commands into more than one expression and more than one command. Only the result from the last of the chain of commands of the sequence function is returned to the solver. So sequence is good, like if I wanted to set up several variables as 0, sequence A is equal to 0, B is equal to 0, C is equal to 0, and then we continue on. Break, it allows you to break the loop arbitrarily, and then continue will allow you to skip one iteration of the loop if a condition is met. The sequence command does not have to be in a for loop. It can be used in other applications and other equations. So in this example here, this is the sum of even numbers from 0 to n. You can provide n. And then our initialization commands takes the form of a sequence chain of letting I is equal to 0, and then s I use for sum equal to 0. And then you got your conditional. I'm letting I be the counter variable, so get I is less than n, and n will be and entered by the user when this equation is solved. And then the conditional, I'm sorry, the next command is like letting I equals I plus 2, incrementing I by 2. And this last one here just adds I to S, I to the sum. Now if I could have more than one loop command and I don't have to use the sequence chain, but unfortunately for the initialization command, we have to use sequence. If you're going to use for especially, please do not forget the let and get commands. Otherwise, you run the risk of having variables you didn't want on when you go to solve the equation, you're gonna run, if these are not, the let and get are not used, you're gonna run the risk of having variables you don't want as the part of the solving, part of the variables to solve for. Definitely use get, it comes in real handy. So icing does let as store, get as recall. And yes, as you can probably see, the equation editor, the more complex your equations becomes, there's going to be please keep track of parentheses because they will grow like weeds. This is not RPN logic.
You have color parentheses.
Yes.
Excel sometimes does.
Yes, exactly. This is like Excel, and here's some screenshots.
Is there a way to change the contrast in the app so you can have a whiter background for the screen?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if the app has a contrast in the app.
A little white app with black characters is the easiest to read, I find. I mean, it looks like an old LCD display, which is nice and faithful, but the white screen would be easier to read.
Maybe possible future skins will have that setting.
I've got one for the HP50 that, which the same control would adjust the contrast on the real 50. If you go all the way to the end of it, it'll turn into a white screen and black characters. It's very nice.
Now I'm trying to think if the M42 has a contrast like with pressing on plus and minus.
Yeah, plus and minus, yeah.
That's a
There's
good
the
one.
HP50 white screen.
List can be used in equations. List has been introduced in Free 42. I don't know if I don't think lists are available for the Swiss Micros DM42. But lists can be used in equations. In my experience, most list commands here must be typed out in the equation. I haven't found an easy way to get all the list commands in the menu. By the way, in the solver, and this is true for every HP that does have a solver, you can type out the commands. You can type out list commands, tree commands, and as long as it has the appropriate arguments, you're good. List can also be created by new list. There we go. A new list does not take any arguments. However, if you try to create a new list in an equation, it could get hairy. it could get hairy. So for this particular one, it's like I created a list of random numbers. I just used the regular random number function of the plus42. You can specify, I let n be the length and that can be specified. And that's accomplished by a for loop once again. Sequence, the initial commands is a sequence. So I let L be the variable L1, become the new list. And then let's set the counter variable K to be 1. The conditional would be if K is greater than or less than or greater than N. And then the next command would be incrementing K by 1. And the loop, there's 2 loop commands, and this is a good illustration of having more than one loop command. You don't have to use a sequence for loop commands. First of all, using item to store, no, there's only one, I'm sorry. There's to store a random number inside the list 1. And then my example here is I did the generator of 4 random numbers. And in this case, I could just put 4 in N, and then I just hit the eval soft button. And just like the HP calculators with the solve, you have the item. You can have the item with the item you can call cash flows. You can call statistic list. You can now item takes care of list of any name you want and the position. And then I have R1 and K as item L1 of K, and then you can input K, and then you can get whatever the command, whatever element is there. In lists, list indices start with 1. And lists can also be used in analysis. For example, for the sum of list L1, I have a sum command. Average, I have the average. I could do the sum of L1. Now I could have also created a user function sum1 and then just used it in average 1. And that could have made the typing of average 1 a lot easier. Sizes is the length of the list. Here is a monster one, trying to find the maximum value of list 1. The maximum and minimum command of the equation editor only allows for 2 arguments. So if I wanted to get the maximum value of a list, I have to compare 2 elements at a time. And you can see very quickly that there's a lot of parentheses and there's a lot of colons involved. There's an illustration for sum, an average, and you can see here the equation for maximum takes up the whole screen. Plus42 also allows you to do matrices in equations. And you have your usual, you can create a new matrix. Item can expand to 3. If you have 3 arguments in the item, it will give you the position at the row, at specified row and column. Determinant, inverse, transposer matrix, and you also have 3 norms and sums. For Venus, for Venus norm, row norm, and sum norm. Also, if you're going to use matrices and equations, the sequence command comes in very handy. So these next examples use a sequence, and then the last command is the item to recall the element of the calculated matrix.
Oh, there's a screw up.
There we go. In these examples, I just let M1 be a 2 by 2 matrix. Now, I could have created it in an equation, but I decided to just go into the matrix editor of the Plus42 and create it the way I would have created it in the DM42 or 42S. It's just easier. And then fairly easy to just to recall any element of the matrix. Again, index pointers always start with 1.
No, they were the same time.
And then to get a transpose of a matrix, I do a sequence transpose function, and then I also do an item because I can only recall one element of a time of a matrix.
Oh, that's easier, 5 minutes, but it's more than 5 minutes. So the 45, 40.
Pretty similar approach for inverse. Can units be in equations? The answer is yes. You can use, when you're solving equations, you can insert units by the units key to attach to any variable. Just make sure that it's consistent with the categories, like they all have to be length, or they all have to be area, or just make sure the units do make sense. And using the units menu is the best way to handle measures with any kind of units. If you store the units in the variable, the units go with them. So I have taking the Pythagorean theorem, I have the equation. Now I didn't designate any units in the equation. However, here, when I go to solve, I would put the units before I hit the soft key with the corresponding variable. And they are stored with the units with them. That is going to be the cleanest way of handling units with the solver.
Does this calculator have an infinite stack or a 4-level stack?
You can set it to either 4-level stack or big stack will be infinite. If you were to use a constant number, say if I had a circle and I had to add 5 inches to the radius, you can enter the number and then hit the units key and then select whatever unit you have. The unit will be in quotes. It has to be that format for the equation editors to accept it. And you can enter your variables the way with the units and it will solve. Now, if you want to de-unit a variable, you have to clear it first. And you can clear it with the clear variable command. There's also a unit function to attach a number to a unit. If you do that, however, if you do use the unit function instead of just the designation as a constant, not only the numbers get stored in the variable, the unit does not. And now for something extra. The Plus42 can also plot functions. And you can use an equation or you can use a program. And this is kind of like a way how to use a program to plot the function. So for example, I have y is equal to x over 4 times x squared, and obviously in radians. Do you have the equation plot or program plot? I'm going to use the program plot. So my program here, and I'm going to set it up like I was going to set up a solver, like if I was going to solve it. Using the MVARs once again, x and y. And then when you get to the plot, you can hit the plot key, and then you have the program plot, and it will bring up any eligible program that can be plotted. And then your parameter is how you're going to be setting your axis, the x and y axis, and what variable to use as the independent and dependent variable. You start with the x-axis first, and then you designate a variable for the y-axis. Now, if you have any other variables that are not going to be your independent or dependent variables, like a constant, you can set those as constant variables. So back here, if I had, say, an MVAR A, and the equation had a constant A, you can designate that variable as a constant, and you can have as many constants as you want. Okay. And then in the view menu, you're going to set up your window area. You can have your own X and Y minimum and maximum for the window, or you can do an autoplot with the scan feature. And this is where I use the scan feature to let the Plus42 determine to determine the window. And then all you have to do is hit plot, and there you go. The equation is plotted. That can now the plot for right now. They can you can go around on the plot. I think you can do trace, but it would have to be like through the print menu. I haven't been able to get that successfully, but I think you can also find an area under the curve.
Doesn't look like there's much.
My blog is edspy31415.blogspot.com. That's where I cover many mathematics and calculators. Are there any questions?
Is there a documentation of that, the new Plus42? Is there a manual for that that shows how the features work?
Thomas Elkin's website will have a listing of all the commands. So
But
it's going to be in the same place where you are able to download.
Okay.
Why isn't it 31416?
Truncation.
Truncation.
There you go.
It's a job, Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.